first episode, we wanted to talk about the uptick in violence that is happening to our community. So we want to talk about and see how we can address this and possibly stop it. So I want to really just start off just for brief introductions, if we can go around the table and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, if anyone wants to start. Sammie?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Sammie Ablaza Wills. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the executive director of APINC. APINC is an organization of trans, non-binary, and queer Asian and Pacific Islander folks in the Bay Area. Our work really focuses on transformation, leadership development, and political work to meet our needs. I first came into the organization myself as a summer intern 8 years ago, which is a wild amount of time ago. And I have really found my organizing home. And I think in moments like this, where there's so much violence, both interpersonally and at the state level, I'm very, very grateful to have a space where I can work with other political, organized, radical folks that are working to create change at every level. On the day-to-day, I work as an organizer, but I'm also involved in organizations like Asians for Black Lives and Movement Generation. And my heart work is as a death doula, working with folks at the end of their life and working with communities to help us grieve fluently. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks, folks.
Rock M, if you wanted to go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rock M Sakura. I was on the cast of season 12 of RuPaul's Drag Race. I am a Asian Pacific Islander drag queen that was based in San Francisco. I have moved out of the Bay in the last few months. I mean, blame gentrification. I can't really afford anything anymore. So I'm here in LA now. So I do a lot of work as like a social media influencer, and just like I make TikToks and a lot of Asian people follow me and stuff. And so like, I guess I'm a community leader in that aspect, but I'm like, I really just wanted to say thank you so much for having me and letting me join in on this conversation that we're having right now, this discussion. Well, not letting me, I would have been here anyway. I would have forced my way in, you know, we're not doing that complacency thing.
Well, thank you, Rock M, for being here. Akshaya?
I don't know how to follow such glowing intros. Hi, everyone. My name is Akshaya. I use she, her pronouns. I am a grad student at Emory University. I'm doing a JD MBA degree because I'm a glutton for punishment. It's a 4-year degree where I'm both in the law school and business school. And right now I am very happily doing the first year of my full-time MBA program at the Gozera Business School. And there I'm also the incoming president of the Gozera Pride Alliance. And I've been doing movement work within LGBTQ plus API community for quite a while before coming to Emory. I was a founding board member of Parivar, which is a transgender nonconforming centered LGBTQ plus South Asian queer organization. And they've been doing incredible work organizing, providing direct aid and community spaces in the Bay Area. And I'm really grateful to be part of the kinds of movement work that's been going on in the Bay Area. And I'm really grateful to be here on this panel.
Well, thank you, everyone. So my name is Jonathan Chung, pronouns he, him. I'm the current president of the Prison Foundation, and we are a nonprofit here in the Bay Area that gives out scholarships and grants to queer and API students and organizations across the nation, doing work to kind of amplify the LGBTQ plus API voice. So I kind of wanted to get started, and I kind of wanted to ask if any of us have had experiences where you maybe had dealt with microaggressions or even had hate, whether it's personally or anyone in your family. If anyone.
Like just microaggressions in general.
Microaggressions. Or
I mean, that's the thing here is like, I'm sure every one of us on this panel can pull out like a plethora of instances, but the thing is that microaggressions happen so abundantly and so voluminous that it's hard to kind of pick out like instances that aren't just like part of our day-to-day life. especially being like in the Bay Area, you kind of think that the environment like surrounding the Bay Area is like very liberal, very like very inclusive, but day to day, like the kind of microaggressions that I experience, especially as a cis gay man, are innumerable. Like the Castro is like nothing but like cis whites fit like representation. Like that's all they want over there. Dating platforms are very like anti-Asian. A lot of people have been like no spice, no rice. Can you imagine being that racist though? It just blows my mind. I don't, white people just like to rhyme. It's not my fault, but like, yeah. But yeah, for my experience, it's been a lot on like dating apps in the scene, and also just representation for queer femme Asian men that isn't sexualized.
I think for me, one of the stories I remember, I grew up in Long Beach, which is a very kind of diverse city, but I grew up in a very white dominant neighborhood because my parents wanted me to kind of have a good education. It was a good school district. And I just remember a situation really where my dad, we were sitting down for dinner and a kid came to the door selling candy. And, my dad was like, right now we're sitting down for dinner, we can't buy anything. And the kid literally yelled at my dad, "Go back to your home country." And that was like my first experience. I remember being behind my dad and kind of getting kind of scared, my dad ran after him and was like yelling at him. But for myself, it just made me feel like very scared, very like, didn't want to I was not as brave as my dad yelling after the person screaming that. But, he immigrated here from Hong Kong, trying to find a better life for his family, and to be told to kind of go back to your home country over not buying a piece of candy, he got riled up. So I definitely know, there are situations where they're very, every day, and there's just kind of in your face situations. I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
Sounds like a metaphor for capitalism, doesn't it?
Well, definitely, if anyone else wants to share, I want to definitely talk about any kind of experience or work that you're currently doing to kind of combat this violence or this hate that our community is facing.
Microaggressions have been one of like the main topics of conversation within a lot of leadership at student leadership at Goizueta. I think that in the wake of the AAPI violence and the reaction that a lot of people had it was overwhelmingly positive in the community, but there were a couple of people that, instead of taking the time to really use that moment to like come out and support their AAPI classmates or offer any sort of support, or find ways to donate or in some other way mobilize in response, they chose to use that time to minimize the actual violence at hand, and they try to make the argument that we can't jump to conclusions that this is anti-Asian violence, and this was kind of immediately after, I believe it was members of the police department had did not deem it a hate crime. And there was quite a lot of backlash, and keep in mind that this happened like very close to like our schools. So this is something that's like very like close, like top of mind for us, and like something that we've all been thinking about. And particularly for the AAPI folks, it was something that was like so present in the way that we cared for ourselves and the way that we planned out our day. I remember being like particularly scared for my safety because and like just choosing not to go grocery shopping, choosing to like stay indoors and quarantine when I didn't really need to quarantine, and just things it was really disheartening to experience microaggressions in response to violence. And I think that that's what people understand, is that those kinds of statements, while they can't seem like statements to some that particularly are in places of power and places of privilege, that kind of minimization of grief and of trauma that people are actually experiencing, that communities are experiencing, is incredibly hurtful, and it directly invalidates our pain, and it just makes for an environment that doesn't allow for like community, like it doesn't allow for a lot of growth, and it doesn't allow for people to kind of come together. So I think like that, so that's why microaggressions are something that I think that we just need to keep having that conversation. As exhausting as it gets to kind of initiate that conversation over and over, it seems like that's where we kind of need to like start and like ground ourselves in, and like doing that kind of work and making sure that dialogue is happening.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think going off of that, one of the things that I feel like I experienced a lot in the wake of especially the shooting in Atlanta, which was a really heartbreaking time, like I can't underscore enough how like personally heartbreaking it is to realize that such an act of violence will happen, and also that so much like lies would come afterwards from the police department, from white-led mainstream media and all these things. But one of the myths that I think has been popping up all over the place is like, wow, so like Asians experience violence now too, which is wild and whack and just very historically ungrounded. And I think that that's actually part of what our work needs to be. And for us as a community, but also for all of the people that are in allyship with us, Asian American history is wrought with violence, both interpersonally and on the state level. Ever since Asians have been in the so-called United States, there has been violence and exclusion and minimization of our experiences, from the Page Act to the Chinese Exclusion Act to the violence against Filipino farm workers to the Islamophobic violence after 9/11 that literally continues to this day, to all of the violence against trans and gender nonconforming people. Violence is baked into the history of our existence in this place. And I think that it's actually really important to understand that for people that want to be in allyship with us, because it allows people to understand that the things that are happening in this moment are not random, right? Like this thing that happened in Atlanta, as heartbreaking as it was, also wasn't wholly surprising, because I grew up with my mom being sexualized, having violence against her, witnessing the ways that people would exotify her body, but also just kind of like throw her to the side whenever, because of tired tropes about what Asian women are, who they are, and what they're for. And I think it's like so infuriating that people actually don't realize the depths to which our community has not only gone through struggles, but been resilient to overcome, to organize, to fight back, because that's as much a part of our history as the violence that people need to know.
Thank you. Well, definitely, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of the media coverage kind of swept it under the rug, didn't give us, there was not a lot of coverage, or even excuses were made, right, that this isn't a hate crime. Let's take it into a little bit more personal. What about conversations with family? How do you have conversations about this hate that's going on? And also on top of that, be an ally with the Black Lives Matter movement. How do we have conversations at home, especially when we have different generations that have different kind of understandings about what's going on, how they feel?
I definitely come from a family where they kind of my parents have definitely kept this mindset of like, keep your head down, complacency, kind of like model minority myth, don't raise any waves and that sort of thing. But like, I think it's really important for us as AAPI people to be open and vocal about supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, because as we all know, like the Black Lives Matter movement it's not just about Black lives. It's a movement to like address inequality here, like in the States. And we can't be good like allies if we're not like actively like voicing our opinion. I think definitely people are comparing the Stop Asian Hate to the Black Lives Matter movement too much like apples and oranges, and whether and like it's not like addressing the system of like the ingrained inequality that's in the US as like a whole. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I really vibe with that. I think it's important that people understand that both are like addressing both are necessary and they're not the same. Like the history of non-Black Asian folks in this country is very different than the history of Black folks in this country. And both need to be understood to be able to like advocate and find one's right position in creating change. You know, while it is appropriate for me as a trans Filipino person to be here talking about this and sharing my experience and helping my organization and my people raise our voices up to be heard, that's definitely not the appropriate thing to do when it comes to Black Lives Matter. You know, my role in that movement, my role in that space is to listen to Black voices that are organizing and to amplify their message to my community so that we can make that change happen. And I think what Jonathan is asking around, like, how do we talk to different generations, I think is a really critical one, because in for a lot of us, not for all of us, but for a lot of us, that will be our role, how to translate the ideas into concepts and questions that will actually resonate with our communities. I think a really salient one is when we think about defunding and abolishing the police. That's like, as much as I don't want it to be, it's still a hard one for a lot of people in our community. And so oftentimes when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about the question like, okay, well, what makes you feel safe? Because that's a much easier conversation to start with rather than like, so police, like, hate them all, right? You know, that's not the starting place often.
Sammie, I you bring up such a good point. It's talking about the history of, talking about both the history of non-Black POC and of Black folks as separate, but both important to understand both. I really think that part of that's really like the key to really communicating what the issue at hand is to people in our community is really like by talking about the history. I think that understanding the historical context of these for instance, the epidemic violence against Asian folks is really important. Understanding how similar socio-political responses to major geopolitical events resulted in the murder of Vincent Shin and the murder of people in Atlanta. It's that same kind of response in society where because people are angry because in response to some sort of event that's beyond them, they'll take it on someone that they see perhaps as less as inferior to them, as a little bit less human. That allows them, that really allows them to commit that kind of violence. And I think that like using that history and or trying to bring up historical examples that that maybe my parents are more familiar with, like say historical examples from Indian history that they have some more like familiarity with, and because I really think that it's not enough to just inform our parents or to inform people as things are going on. It's like part of that is really to start to like have conversations that get people to think about things in a different way and to really start thinking about things in a little bit more of in a perspective that kind of like zooms out a little bit, that understands historical context and that understands that that these are systemic issues and not just kind of like random acts of violence or things like that. And I think that's also a really big part of it. But also having those conversations with our parents is really difficult, and especially especially for folks that are of marginalized identities, it's particularly hard to have these kinds of conversations, even though we also have like because of our like layered identities, we also have that layered perspective, and we have the perspective to be able to really think about things in like a different way. So it's tough, but it's kind of the work that has to be done.
Yeah. I definitely think it's important to just at least have the conversation, and like Sammie says, maybe it's not about defunding the police, but finding something that's more simple, right? How do you feel safe? And finding that common history and that common theme that runs through any people of color, that their history and the hardship that they went through. So I definitely think it's having that open conversation is really important with family. And a lot of times we're all doing, work within this space. How do you as individuals find resiliency to continue to do this work after, story after story after story, we're kind of bombarded nonstop and we just came out of COVID. How do you find that resiliency to continue to do work in this space? And what are you doing?
I don't know about y'all, but I'm tired. I'm tired. I don't if y'all have any advice to find some resiliency, like I'm really open. I mean, I don't know. I am exhausted. Like I don't even want to like say that like I'm feeling like I'm, I think that it's kind of just taking it day by day and trying to find the things, finding time for yourself, intention to take time for yourself and do the things that really make you feel good. I've tried to be out in nature a little bit more, be away from my screen. Georgia's beautiful. There's so many different nature preserves. And as someone that like came from California to another place that's just covered in really wonderful forests and stuff, it's really great.
I think for me, I'm a very quiet person when it comes to situations. For me, it's taking step by step. I am not the person to hop on a mic to be able to speak eloquently, but it's taking those first steps one by one. For me, I remember when COVID first hit, there was a situation at a Panda Express where I heard someone in line while I was ordering kind of talking about, me being in line and just standing there. And so, but I didn't say anything, right? I kept quiet, about Asian. But I learned that I need to take steps forward, to change that kind of mental block I have, or just a fear of kind of being in someone's face or being confrontational. And so over even taking the first step and doing the rally last week and then being comfortable to lead this discussion, even though I feel like I'm an imposter, I feel like, resiliency is like one step at a time. Don't dive to, wherever you're comfortable with, just take that first step. And that's how I feel for myself. I've been resilient in being able to like not overwhelm myself and be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think resiliency is hard because it's going to look different for all of us, and it's going to come and go and flow like as hard shit happens and as we learn from it. And when I first started organizing, I think there was a pressure to like do everything and do it right, get it right on the first try and say the right thing perfectly. And every individual had to do it that way. And I think that that's unrealistic. Because I'm always learning, like I am always learning and I'm always growing, and I'm growing with people around me. And so I think actually releasing myself of the pressure to do everything and releasing other people of the pressure to do everything is really important. And I do not mean pendulum swing to the other side and do nothing, but I mean like very, very strategically think about, once again, the role that you're going to play, so you know what you can and you can't do, and where you're going to stretch and where you're going to challenge yourself and where you're going to take time for rest. And I feel very fortunate that early on in my organizing journey, as I was thinking about my own like hardship and how difficult everything felt for me, I was reminded of and regrounded of this idea by Bayanihan, this like Filipino value, I guess. There's like, I feel like a lot of Filipino folks in their homes might have this painting of folks who are carrying someone's house, like in the village, they like put some bamboo sticks under someone's house and they pick it up and they carry it to safety because there's like a landslide or, whatever, the house isn't safe there. They need to move it somewhere else. And it's, to me, essentially what it means is like community care. When you're in a rough place, when you're in a hard place, other people in the community will literally rally around to come, pick you up, help you move to safety. And when it is someone else's time in the community where they're having a hard time, it's your responsibility to do that too. And I think that's what resiliency is about for me. It's not just about building individually, am I good, am I okay, but building up enough structures in our community for all of us to feel safe and held so that in moments of crisis, nothing is dependent on just one person alone.
Thank you, Sammie. Anyone else? All right. Well, definitely I want to, there's not any questions from the audience. I want to kind of ask all our guests today, if there is a piece of advice that you can give to an individual or even an organization that's trying to, to do work in the space of, the stopping API hate, what word of advice would you give?
If I were to give any sort of advice to people who are out there who are feeling like they feel powerless or they don't really have anything to say right now to stop AAPI hate, it's that think about your influence in the world or what's around you, like the pages in a phone book, individually. Like, I know this might sound like a dated reference. Do you guys know what a phone book is? Let's just say a book. How about a dictionary or something? So think of like your influence and the way that you conduct yourself, voicing your distaste for microaggressions, talking to your family, talking to your friends, talking to your teachers. Think of it as like an entrance, like a definition of a word, okay? Alone, it might not seem like enough to you, and it might seem daunting, and it might seem like we're never gonna fill out this whole book, you know what I mean? But if you influence other people, then they add more and they add more. Think of yourself as like a small piece in a larger picture, but it doesn't, like, our change can't happen unless you actually go out there and do even like what you can, the smallest amount. But also too, like, really just like, it's time to have balls, guys. Like, as much as I want you all to feel comfortable, we have to be uncomfortable, because there's so many things that we learn as AAPI people that we have to be comfortable, do like what, just like be in our own, like, we have to learn to be uncomfortable and do things that are different, because that's the conversation here, is unlearning things like complacency or things that narratively we have been told that AAPI people are, So if I had any advice to you now, it's get at least a little bit more uncomfortable and do something, voice your opinion, and just like talk to your friends and your loved ones and have those uncomfortable conversations. Because as uncomfortable as you are, think about people who are like experiencing like physical violence and hate out there, and like the actual kind of ramifications of being silent and kind of like taking part of this like this kind of like collective silence, so yeah, be uncomfortable and talk about microaggressions, because as much as you might want white approval, it's worthless. What's it gonna get you?
Yeah. Thank you, Rocco. Anyone else?
I think, oh man, it's hard, because I think, okay, when something like this happens, I find it very hard to just dive in, because sometimes I just don't know where to start. I think the one thing that I really like just recommend people do is really take the time to research and understand the work that's being done on the ground. I can't overstate how important it is to support local organizations that are doing the work, and particularly in times of when there are tragedies that take national headlines but are happening in a very specific community, you need sometimes it's not necessarily your place if you're thousands of miles away. You don't have a lot of connection to that community to kind of like own a conversation and make it like about yourself, or it's not something that's necessarily directly related to you. So I think like if you have a better understanding of the context, it makes you a better ally, knowing. So having an understanding of the context, but also having an understanding of who you are and what the role that you can possibly play in this. And that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, one, understanding like your own privileges and kind of like where, the kinds of things that you may have that you may have had as a benefit for you in your life that other folks have not had. And maybe I remember one of the most poignant things that a friend of mine had said, in respect, soon after this violence was, sometimes I think that those women could have been me, but then I also remember that they probably wouldn't have been me because I'm someone that has come with like a lot of like sets of privileges that, I'm someone that's often able to be, live in places that, have, are safe and things like that. But I really think that doing that hard work of learning is really the first step before taking action. So I definitely just recommend that people take that time in the very beginning.
Yeah, I really appreciate the things that you both have said. I think the only thing that I have to add is that in addition to understanding the local context, in addition to getting uncomfortable and acting, I feel like a little broken record sometimes because I'm always like, history, like, know your history, but know your history. Like, people have made mistakes in the past, so we don't have to make them again. Like, we can make new mistakes. We can like live it up and make full new mistakes and have a whole ass different time. And I think that's what I would really recommend. Like, there have been organizations working to stop AAPI hate before that hashtag existed. And those organizations, those people, those movements are going to continue to need support after this is not in the headlines anymore. And I think that there's a lot of power to come from history. Just to say, I grew up thinking that I was not going to be alive past 22. I was like, definitely am not even going to be alive. I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know what kind of life I'm going to live, but I don't even think it's going to be that long. And one of the most life-changing things for me was to meet other queer and trans API elders who were in their 60s, who lived full lives, changing communities, winning amazing battles against white and capitalist oppressive systems that said directly to me that life is worth living because of how much we can do as a community together. And I think in their resilience, in their strength, in their accomplishments, there's so much to be learned about how we can move forward together, where we can get uncomfortable, how we can center local work, and how we can think of this not only as reacting to moments of harm and violence, but proactively building the world that we want to see, envisioning for something much, much bigger than the arrest of one person or the takedown of one dude. Actually, that there's like a whole big picture that we can accomplish together.
So I have a question for you guys. If someone is watching this right now and they want to educate themselves and they want to learn the history, where is a good place for them to kind of start and have that conversation with themselves, or like understand where they fit in that? Because I know that sometimes it can be daunting to be like, okay, I got to know my history, but where do I start?
Well, great fucking question. Yes. Literally, this is the most exciting question for me because, history is daunting. Let me also just say, like, when I talk about history, I'm definitely not talking about like AP US history, like read a book, not that at all. I'm talking about the fun history that's also like the juicy secrets of our elders who have all like been in a relationship with each other and like lived in a cabin in Oregon for 5 years. I'm talking about like that fun history. And two places that I would direct folks. One is a project called A Different Asian American Timeline, which folks can find at aatimeline.com. And it is an incredible timeline of 600 years of history of Asian American or Asian folks in so-called America. And this different Asian American timeline, what I think it does really, really well is it doesn't just present history as like one moment and then one moment, but it talks about how different things have been connected throughout time and the narrative that makes our existences present here. The other thing that I would say is APINC, we've been running a project for the past many years now called the Dragon Fruit Project, which is an oral history project of trans and queer Asian and Pacific Islander folks in the Bay Area. And at dragonfruitproject.org, people can see the individual narratives of people in our community that have done work for years, have loved on one another, have fought hard battles, and have just existed as people, as humans. And I've learned tremendously through the stories of the Dragon Fruit Project. And for folks that are local, I think some of the best ways to learn about history is to get involved with organizations and asking people directly. And I know that's not a privilege that everyone has, but for those that have that locality, for those that are in a city that has a local organization, I would also really recommend that as a site of where that learning can happen, because reading history in a book, I think, is one of the best ways to teach people that they don't like history. But when you get to learn history directly from people, I think it makes that word, makes that concept so much better.
Thank you for answering that. I always hate it when people are like, make sure to go to your local library and check out this book on this and that. No.
So unhelpful.
Oh man, I totally, I completely understand. I think especially now, because I spend way too much of my time looking at a screen or just like looking at text. Sometimes I just need a break from reading, and I really have found a lot of enjoyment in podcasts. I really enjoyed listening to really great history podcasts. Throughline from NPR is one of my favorites. And I really think that it's a great medium to explore history, and also to listen in on people's conversations that are happening right now. One of my favorite people that I follow that they have been inspired by for years is Alok Vednanan. And I remember one day just doing a search of like all of their interviews that I could find on podcasts, and just kind of like listening to some of the great people, some of the people in our generation that have read incredibly and have a lot of like incredible like nuanced thinking that they are sharing with the world. I really have found a lot of great recommendations, frankly, from my social media, because I take time to follow people that inspire me on the day-to-day, and I get a lot of really great recommendations for ways to dive into history that aren't, like a history textbook that feels more inaccessible. So yeah, but I thank you, Sammie, for that recommendation. I also recommend, if anyone is interested in, there's a lot of oral histories that are done in digital archives. The South Asian Digital Archive, SADA, is a really great example. They have they collect a lot of different history, and they're conducting a lot of projects right now where they're trying to represent history of the larger South Asian diaspora across the world. Densho is another great example for folks that want to learn more about Japanese American history. There's a lot of great ways that we can really lean into the knowledge of our elders and watch these kinds of recorded interviews and things like that. And I've always enjoyed that. So that's what I recommend.
Thank you. Definitely, we would love to get these sites, and somehow we'll get them either on a Facebook post on our website to be able to share with those that we will be putting this on our video up. So we'll definitely get those sites for you. And I've been actually part of the Dragon Fruit Project when we were transcribing the stories, and just hearing the
Yes.
story. I think I did 2 or 3 of them, was amazing. The work, these elders that are like telling the stories on the struggles that they went through was amazing. And Through Line, love that podcast. I definitely and I just want to go ahead and just close out with any of our guests have anything else to kind of comments or any other additional things they would love to add. Well, I want to go ahead and thank everyone for taking time out of your Saturday to join us. And hopefully, people got a lot of knowledge, got a lot of different resources to learn more about history. And I want to thank our guests today for joining us. And we'll be putting up a slide of some organizations that are also doing work in the Stop API Hate or who are already doing work, and you feel free to go ahead and support them or get involved with them as well. I want to thank everyone and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much
you.
for having us.